An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 173. I'm Aaron Pallier.
And I'm Darlene.
We watched The Creeping Flesh from 1973 today. It's an interesting movie. We're both kind of waffling about it in some ways. Darlene, do you have any first things to say about it before I kind of start going into who is in this, who is why this movie kind of stuck out to me to pick?
Well, it's British. It's 94 minutes. It actually feels like it was done in the 50s and 60s instead of the 70s.
It feels like a Hammer horror, but it isn't. And the reason why it feels like a Hammer horror is because the sets are good and the caliber of actors are good. In fact, it uses two of the actors that tended to be in Hammer horror films, being the two leads, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
It takes place in Victorian age.
Like 1890 something, yeah.
Yeah. And I like that they did paintings in the credits.
Yes. So we are going to gripe about this film, but I'm also going to praise it where it is due, as I tend to do in these reviews. It's a very rare instance where a movie has no complaints from me. There has been a couple where I was just like, yeah, I can't really think of anything wrong. This does have some things wrong. Or at least things that bothered me about it, and bothered you, right, Darlene?
Yes. Most of it's dealing with the plot, though.
Yeah.
And how it began and ended.
Yes. Well, how it began, to me, basically spoils the entire movie. Basically. And I can talk about that really quick because we should just go into the plot. Like I said, this is Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. They play brothers Emmanuel. Peter Cushing plays Emmanuel, and Christopher Lee plays James. And Emmanuel has a daughter named Penelope, played by Lorna Heilbronn. They're all very good at their job in this.
Well, the person that plays Penelope also ends up playing her mother.
Does she?
In back memory.
Does she? I guess so. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. No, it's a completely different person, Darlene.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Jenny Rucker.
Wow. I thought it was the same person.
No. So the movie starts actually with a man painting a very sinister looking painting next to a table of bones. Okay, now the painting's very good. It's actually very interesting. It's kind of like Hieronymus Bosch meets Van Gogh meets I don't know. It's weird. Meets
it
Picasso.
Looks like something that would be done in the 1990s.
I don't know. It's
artists.
Very good. It's very good. Like if they used that as the movie poster, it would have drawn people in for sure, rather than the movie poster that it has, which is kind of grim and all that. But anyway, he's painting this painting next to a table of bones as the credits roll. And it turns out that it's Peter Cushing as Emmanuel Hildern. And he's talking about evil being a disease, and he's isolated, and he shows a man what it looks like through a microscope. And he's in this kind of white void room, and the man that he's talking to is in a white lab coat, okay, where where Emmanuel is not. He's kind of in his Victorian style men's suit, and he starts telling his story. But I kind of thought immediately, oh, okay, he's either dead and he's kind of talking to somebody in the spirit world because of this kind of white void, or he's in an insane asylum.
Well, or in his dream.
Yeah, but which did it turn out? To me, it was like either he's dead or he's in an asylum.
Well, it turned out to be the asylum.
He's in an asylum. Like, so I thought that the beginning of the movie pretty much ruined it. How, like, they could have completely taken out that intro with him talking to the scientist and started where the movie actually, properly starts in the flash, like him telling the story. You could have had it start right there without have this like over dialogue, the narration of it, of why he has found this information. It's not very long, but it ruins the movie, and it basically wastes about 2 minutes of time. And that seems fairly petty, but this first scene sets the stage for the movie being you kind of know what happens if you have guessed correctly. So it ruins some of the horror that is in it. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying right now. Do you agree with me, Darlene? Speak up,
I don't think it ruined it for me. It just at the end made me go, and then it made me question at the end of everything.
Yes.
And the one thing that I didn't like about this movie is it felt like there was two plots going.
Well, we haven't even really talked about the plots yet.
Yeah, but it kind of like meshes but pulls apart.
Yes, it's strange. So Emmanuel basically starts narrating that he has just recently been to Papua New Guinea and has returned home with the remains of an extinct hominid. Okay, so bipedal humanoid, right? That might be related to humans. Clearly is not. Clearly
because he
is not.
shows a skull of a Neanderthal. Did I?
Nope.
Or what was it? He shows a skull.
Yes,
of
an extinct hominid of some sort, Neanderthal.
And then he puts it beside the skeleton.
So the skull is clearly not humanoid. It's not primate. It is something weird. Yes, it has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth.
It's alien.
It's an alien. But the rest of its body is very human. It's basically a human skeleton with really large hands and a very alien head.
If the body was somebody that was actually
like 7 or 8 foot tall.
Yeah.
But the point is he's extremely excited that he found this, and his daughter Penelope greets him, and then his assistant is named Waterloo, not Waterloo, Waterlow. Again, strange. And he's also there, and they take they take the skeleton into his lab, and it's a combination of chemistry, like your typical BS chemistry in a science fiction film, which means colored fluids and beakers that people tend to put in any scene that is, this is a science area. People are doing science. Let's just fill some beakers with colored liquid. And it pisses me off when they do it, when it has nothing to do with the science. Now here I can sort of see it, right? But I'm going to call out one use of colored liquid in beakers in an entirely inappropriate situation. And it was Picard season 1, where they go into the Daystrom Institute in a shut down research facility for AI. And the desk just has beakers and test tubes filled with colored liquid doing nothing, that's sitting in an abandoned lab. Like, God damn it, just why? But anyway, it's like this weird combination of chemistry and biology. There's also like a monkey that's in a cage.
Yes, but it does have
there's
thing.
A purpose to it. Yeah. So Penelope seems to already understand that her father gets sucked into his research. Emmanuel ends up unpacking this skeleton with the
But
huge
she
head.
is upset because he won't come to dinner.
Yeah, and he finally gets torn away from his find to go have breakfast with his daughter. While he was away, Penelope has had to let go 2 servants because they don't have enough money. That her father's just kind of is kind of destitute, is not a well-regarded scientist or gentleman, but he does have this really large house, and his brother is actually a well-regarded doctor as well. So there's money in the family. Let's put it that way. But Penelope's like pretty upset that she's had to let go 2 people from the household. He ends up having a letter that's been delivered that says his wife has just passed away. And I thought, okay, now this is interesting. He looks really shocked. And it's actually that he has had his wife, and I'm going to try to cover a whole bunch of scenes here that are scattered throughout the film. He put his wife in an insane asylum for reasons that I'm not really sure what it is about.
She was a singer, dancer,
Prostitute.
And
they got married and had a child.
The question is she really his? Another part.
Well, that's also a good question. But the point is that
because she ended up having affairs after the marriage too.
Well, I have to assume that, even though it's not very clear, because these affairs, she ends up slicing up a guy, and she ends up getting taken to this insane asylum because she's been a naughty girl. And I'm not sure if how am I going to put this? I'm not sure if she was thrown into the insane asylum because she was a loose woman who had an affair and her husband wanted her put away, or if she truly was crazy. See, I don't know.
Because she actually was trapping men to...
Was she?
I got the thing of... See, that's the whole thing. Is this whole movie even just a lucid thing?
A lucid dream of some sort? Yeah, well, it's unreliable narrator. Everything about this movie is an unreliable narrator, because remember, it's being told by Peter Cushing's character's, his character Emmanuel, from an insane asylum with him locked away because he actually is crazy.
But it's also told by the person that's actually it was supposed to be his brother.
No,
but
none
at
of it
the
is.
end of it is kind of, because there's a part where one of and calls him half brother.
But is he a half brother? Like, that was never said in the rest of the movie. See, there's so many questions about like little points in this movie. I don't know. See, watching this movie, we're like in the first couple scenes, we're maybe 15 minutes into it, and we already have a completely different viewpoint on what's happening in this movie. I thought that maybe she had been sent away because she was just a loose woman and wasn't happy in her marriage and was sleeping around.
I really thought it was because she actually went nuts on one of her lovers.
Well, I think, yes, she went nuts on one of her lovers, and that's what really got her put away. But in the end, if she just went nuts on some guy that was like molesting her, inappropriately or whatever, and she defended herself, you would think that it wouldn't be like, I'm going to commit her.
And he's afraid that Penelope will go that way.
Yeah, he's afraid that Penelope will be crazy.
He's told his daughter that her mother was already dead long time ago.
Yeah, and he doesn't let her into his wife's old room because I guess they didn't even sleep in the same room together. She had her own room that is filled with old clothes that are.
Well, it has Did it even have a bed in it?
Yeah, it did.
It did?
Yeah, sure did.
Because I remember the piano. I remember the clothes.
The feathered boas and the
the
low cut
desk
dresses.
that had some stuff that he was keeping.
Perfumes, makeup. There's posters of her like from her dancing days where we're shown like her dancing in a cabaret in a very suggestive way, at least for the time, let's put it that way. Like today, that's like, okay, she's just dancing, she's
What
having a fun
she
time.
in Penelope wears her outfit
Later
and you're
on.
like, that's
a nice dress.
That's a streetwalker's
yeah,
dress.
but for the time, it would have been like, oh, she's a lady of the night. But today, that would be like formal wear.
Yes, but you're
Like,
talking about Victorian
I know,
age.
but I'm just trying to get people in like the idea of when we're talking about, oh, she's, a loose woman or whatever, that when you watch this, if you don't realize that this is trying to be like the 1890s, that you would think we're crazy talking about it as like, oh my God, she's in a scandalous dress because it's low cut. Well, no,
It's
we're not
red.
We're not prudes,
It's
guys.
lace, and it looks like something that was supposed to be in
But
the
that's later
Victorian
on.
age.
We're like an hour away from that
Yes.
scene. We're hour at least. But anyway, the person who's in charge of the asylum is Emmanuel's brother James, who is said as a brother repeatedly through the film up until the last scene, where he says no, he claims to be my half brother, but all crazy people seem to latch on to authority figures like that.
And he thinks that the lady next door is his daughter.
Yeah, and it's like, is this all an unreliable narrator?
Or is this a guy that's trying to because in that time having relatives that are in an asylum,
it's not something you would ever want to admit to, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's possible that Christopher Lee's character here is covering it all up. I know we're kind of talking out of sequence with this movie, but again, it's a movie that you can get two very distinct viewpoints on depending on how you're watching, because we didn't really talk about the plot points of this movie while we were watching it.
No.
We were just kind of taking notes and going, okay, all right. And I already clearly think that Peter Cushing's character was a son of a bitch and isn't the hero, that everyone's kind of the victim, and that it sort of is Christopher Lee that might be the gray hat rather than a white hat, because he's not that good either. But I don't think there's any white hats in this.
I really think that he did take his brother's because he did steal the notes and all that.
Yes, he does.
But that could be the dream.
So again,
too.
we're not even close to this. Yeah, him stealing the notes. But basically, we learned that Christopher Lee's character James is a son of a bitch as well, running this asylum because he's doing crazy electroshock therapy experiments on patients, and he's also doing like MK Ultra stuff on lizards or chickens later on with like flashing lights and LSD, like mind altering drugs, because there isn't LSD around yet.
But he did say that you couldn't do this. You can't do this to a human on a.
Oh, because it's unethical.
But then he makes a snide remark on
later on that how he doesn't mind going around ethics when it's somebody else that does the dirty deed, and then he'll just take advantage of it.
No, he makes a comment that he doesn't consider the people that are underneath him as humans.
Yes,
it kind of.
You son of a bitch! Like, this movie makes me feel a little greasy afterwards. Let's put it that way. None of these characters are good characters. I do, well, I mean, you could maybe make the argument that Emmanuel is, Peter Cushing's Emmanuel is not a victim, but is a victim, but I don't know.
But he's also not a good person, because you don't leave your daughter for 10 years.
No, yeah, okay. So let's get back to the plot. So as Peter Cushing leaves, he walks past this electroshock therapy experiment, and we learn that a guy named Lenny has escaped, and the alarm is raised. And you'd think, all right, well, now this whole plot is going to revolve around Lenny, but it doesn't really. He does come up, though.
He does come out.
And believe it or not, I sort of recognize the actor. I sort of do. The actor's name is Kenneth Warren. And the only reason I sort of recognize him is that he's in tons of bit parts in British productions from the 1950s through the 80s, and in tons of them. So if there is a Hammer horror that we have watched or a general British science fiction, he pops up in it in some way,
Probably
shape, or
almost
form.
as the same character, too.
Yeah, just kind of a background character.
A background character that's menacing, either a thug or in this case, it's an insane guy that...
Yeah, he is kind of crazy. Okay, so we have Peter Cushing coming home to see his daughter reading a romance novel. And I thought, okay, big deal. Jane Austen's been around for, 70, 80 years at this point. That this shouldn't be scandalous. And Peter Cushing just fully lays into her, because it's something her mother would have done, that her mother read romance novels and had flights of fancy. And again, this leads me to believe, this is one of those things that led me to believe that Peter Cushing's character just didn't approve of what his wife did in her life or what her hobbies were. Not that she was a loose woman. And remember, it was him saying, the unreliable narrator saying, that his wife was a loose woman who did all these awful things and she needed to be committed. But his actions outside of that, describing, oh, a romance novel? That's terrible. You can't be doing that. And he really loses his mind about it.
So here's the dichotomy that I got.
Dilemma
that I got. He's been gone to New Guinea.
Yeah, Papua New Guinea.
For a while. This is before planes, so that's a year at least.
I don't know. Yeah, 6 months travel, maybe, let's say. Yeah.
Yes, both.
One way. So years worth
you're
of
talking about years, and maybe his research being another year. So he's been gone 2 years.
Minimum.
His daughter should be, by this time, actually, if you've got this kind of, if you're in this kind of society, you should have been pushing your daughter to get married.
She's 25. The actress is 25 when this
and I was
out.
taking her as being about 25. So you wasted 2 to 3 years of her life that she should have been on market.
But she was on. She was the head of the household, effectively.
Yes, but she was staying because she thought her dad needed her. And what does he do to her?
Just lays into her, or ignores her.
Lays into her and then ignores her for. So he's a shit ass father.
Oh no! Yes, he is a shit ass father. So he lectures her, and leaves the keys behind for the bookcase because he locks the bookcases with romance novels. Again, Darlene, what the F? Who locks bookcases with romance novels?
Especially romance novels at that time.
These aren't smut. This is...
Well, there is smut.
There is smut, but...
Because Fanny Hill is smut.
But that wasn't Fanny Hill.
No. But I did... There is some that
there
are
is
out there.
Smut, but this wasn't. This was like an actual book. Who locks bookcases so his daughter won't read anything in there? This makes me seriously consider the fact that Peter Cushing's character...
People that are controlling.
Yeah, he could not control his wife, so committed her to an asylum. Because he could get away with that as a man from a somewhat wealthy family. Or at least well-regarded family. That scandal shall not touch them. Society doesn't want to have scandal.
Well, their house is huge, so...
Yeah. That's my point. Like, this is not a tale where Emmanuel is a victim in this, where he might be a victim, but he also might deserve to have some sort of punishment.
They have at least a maid, because they had the maid watching her.
Yes, and there was 2 other house workers, let's put it that way.
And then they had to leave two of them out.
So he goes into his lab and washes the bones, and the water seems to soak into the bones, and then flesh starts to form on the bones after the water soaks in.
Which my bitch about this one is, if this is something that is from
Earth.
Earth, excuse me, but anything that is water, you got something that is a catalyst is the water. There's a problem
So
because Earth is what?
yeah, lots of water. But we learn that these bones are associated with an ancient tale of evil from Papua New Guinea. Okay. So that means these bones they have not been sealed in rock for a billion years, right? This has been within living-ish memory, maybe a couple thousand years, meaning that these bones have been exposed to water often.
Doesn't it rain a lot in Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, it rains a lot in Papua New Guinea. Was it in a cave? It shouldn't matter. Caves flood. Is it on the top of a mountain in Papua New Guinea? Snow, and then snow will melt when sun hits it, depending. Like, oh my god. So anyway, this is a problem that we again encounter in many movies, including Signs with Mel Gibson, where if you're an alien species invading a planet that is mostly covered in water, one hopes that the aliens aren't melting from water because like acid, because you don't invade planets like that, especially without spacesuits or protective gear. Like, anyway, I know I'm just
yeah, this is, but that was my thought on this one. Is like he goes to put water on it, and and reads this whole passage about
evil.
Evil with the drops of tears from the sky or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, did you say New Guinea?
So the flesh
like,
basically grows a finger around the bone, finger bone. And he cuts it off.
He cuts it off to stop it from.
So again, this is supposedly a dead skeleton that's been dead. It's all wired together.
Yes, it is, because they pick it up.
All the bones stay together at all times, but he cuts off the finger and
that's
puts
the
it
other
into like
thing. I said, what was the last movie that I had criticized that all the teenage one?
What?
Teenagers from Outer Space.
Teenagers from Outer Space. That's like one of the faults of that movie is just the bones always hold together. So I don't know. He cuts the bones apart, so like at least that bone off, so the flesh doesn't continue to spread. We go back to the asylum to see James doing Frankenstein shit, and that's like him with like body parts hooked up to electrodes.
Is this Peter Cushing or
no? That's Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee. Okay, thank you.
He has body parts hooked up to electrodes, and one of the patients,
that's the arm that was.
Yeah, one of the patients breaks out of his door while no one notices, and he jumps out, grabs James, and takes the keys from him. And he's like, no, I'm just gonna leave now. I've bested you. And James shouts at the guy. He's like, you better turn around, go back into your room. And he pulls out the freaking gun, and the guy's like, you're not gonna shoot me. And Christopher Lee just guns the guy down right there and goes, you should have gone back into your room, you idiot.
He doesn't say idiot.
No, but he just kind of like shrugs, big deal. A guy died. I don't care. It's more organs for my testing, my Frankenstein shit back in the lab. So he's doing like MK Ultra shit. He's doing Frankenstein shit. He is a very poor scientist, Dr. Venkman. So we go back to the Emmanuel's house, and the assistant is about to wash the bones, but Emmanuel like knocks the water away from this guy and starts screaming at him like, you don't wash these bones. You don't do it. And we end up having Penelope getting a hold of the keys again to explore more locked places of the house.
Because he wanted some books that were out of the
romance novel shelf.
It wasn't. It was medical books.
You'd think if these romance novels were so destructive, he wouldn't keep them. Like, that he's obviously so afraid of them.
He would have taken and destroyed the stuff that was in the bedroom.
Yeah. That it's so dangerous.
Or lock it in a
because it's not like he goes in there ever.
Or lock it in a attic in a trunk.
Yeah, but it's not like he goes into that room ever because he says he hasn't been in there since his wife got put
But
in the
it's
asylum.
clean.
But it's clean. Yeah, I know. Anyway, so we end up having Peter Cushing dissecting the finger and it bleeds. And he takes like samples of the blood and it looks like they have like dozens of long flagella, these cells. And he goes, oh my God, it's the cause of all evil. And weird blood cells attack normal human ones and basically eat them. And okay, that's interesting. And he says, oh my God, I'm the most brilliant doctor of all time. I can learn how to inoculate people against evil. And this is where I paused the movie and I went, oh God.
This
Oh,
is where
Jesus.
I walked out of the movie. You must have paused it after I walked out.
Yeah, I did because I was like, okay, Darlene, you have to understand this. I'm like, you're jumping to a conclusion based on a myth that this is an evil skeleton. You're the one that's associating this myth with this skeleton.
Not science.
Not science. You're assuming that. You're assuming that evil is a quantitative thing rather than a moral, ethical, objective, a subjective thing rather than an objective truth. You're a very poor scientist, Dr. Venkman. I mean, and then you don't even know what kinds of cells these are. They look like bacteria, okay?
They look like
big black round cells with flagella all over them. And he just decides that he's going to make an inoculation against these out of infecting somebody's blood, like his own blood, and then getting the serum out of it. And he thinks he's a genius.
And he at one point he injects the monkey.
See, yeah, he does. I'm going to stop here for a second. Again, this is what's bothering me because we didn't really talk about this film when we were watching it or right after we were watching it. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a tale about letting your inhibitions and being immoral while those inhibitions are let loose, and then having Dr. Jekyll be the restrained individual that is moral, is ethical, but is restrained, right? He's the good man. Mr. Hyde is quote unquote evil because he's unrestrained. He doesn't care about others. He's
hedonist.
Yeah. That is a story about an inoculation of sorts that allows, it's more like an inoculation that slowly destroys the man because it's basically an inoculation against ethicalness or moralistic behavior. Okay. This here is, and it comes out of like, I'm experimenting with like the human mind. Okay. I'm experimenting with unknown biology, with human biology to produce a moralistic or ethical effect. What I'm trying to say is I think any Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story generally tries to do this part of the story far better. This kind of idea of science and moralistic ideas meshing together at some point, scientific ethics, et cetera, et cetera. Does scientific ethics truly ever even come up in this movie, though? Not really. They pay lip service to it, but then they clearly don't give a crap about it outside of it.
They're just people that they'll spout it.
I know I keep stopping talking about the plot.
They will spout it, but then not. They're like,
they don't care.
They're like what are those? Those like Tammy Baker in that.
Oh, I don't practice what I preach because I'm not the kind of person I preach to, as Bob Dobbs would once say.
What was his name? Tammy Baker and...
Yeah, Tammy Faye Baker. And yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the plot. Penelope ends up getting into her mother's room and sees her prostitutes' clothes everywhere and says, boy, this is exactly what I want out of life. I want to be a hooker. So that's effectively what happens. She finds a newspaper clipping that says her mother was committed to an asylum, and Emmanuel leaves his lab.
and the letter of her death.
Yeah, and the letter of her death. But that was like from earlier. Like
That's
it was
the same letter that was given to.
Yeah. So Emmanuel ends up leaving his lab and hears his daughter playing his wife's piano, and Penelope confronts him about his lies and how he only and he says he only loved her and not his daughter, that all this history has been kept from Penelope and he has never really cared about her. You know what?
She's right.
She's right. Peter Cushing's character is a bad father, likely a very bad husband, likely a very bad brother. Mind you, his brother is nothing to write home about either. But we end up having a flashback to when Emmanuel and his future wife meet, and she is a cabaret dancer. This is where we get all the weird flashbacks that are actually kind of confusing. She clearly sleeps around with many men for money, for drinks, for drugs, for attention, and seemingly really likes it.
And stabs some people.
Because basically one guy gets rough with her and she stabs him. Fair enough. You know, if you're with a sex worker, you treat them with respect, right?
Yeah.
They're providing you a service. You don't get to slap them around without consent, and she obviously did not consent. I'm not saying that this is something that they would have thought about in the Victorian age, but the point is that she had every right to defend herself. Okay? And they just end up carting her off to the asylum. She screams for help, and Emmanuel basically starts having a mental breakdown, remembering her screams for help. So it's, again, I think he feels guilty about committing her. That this wasn't about really her violent tendencies.
He might have had the you either commit her or
she goes to jail.
She goes to prison.
Oh, and if I can put her in my brother's asylum, maybe that's less. But then why would you be like, no, she's actually completely sane. I have to make sure that my brother understands that, and I'm going to take my daughter to see her all the time so she doesn't feel like she's been left alone. Whereas here in this plot, she was left completely alone, disavowed effectively. Her Emmanuel's brother James basically got to toy with her with MK Ultra shit, and her daughter thought she was dead. Wow, I don't know why I keep kind of dwelling on that, Darlene. I apologize because it bothers me. It bothers me that our hero that we're supposed to feel sympathy for through this has so many unsympathetic actions, or at least actions that can be taken in such a way as to be.
The only person I felt sympathy for was Penelope until.
No, I still felt sympathy because she's a victim. She is a victim in this. She's not a white hat because she does awful things, but she's a victim. And we'll get to that. Basically, the guy that escaped earlier, Lenny, we go to a scene with him in the town, and he basically looks through a window into a bar with sailors filling up ladies of the night. And
he goes in and touches one.
And she's okay with it. She's okay with it. Up until the point where he starts choking her. Okay, fair enough. She has every right to be pretty pissed off.
And so does a lot of these sailors that were their client. Because it was a lot of their clientele was sailors and.
Yes, dock workers, that kind of thing. So this is kind of a rough up bar, but these ladies are pretty nice looking, right? Like they're not low end hookers, at least. That's what it seems like to me. There are some very low cut dresses in that scene. Let's
the innkeeper, we'll put quotations around that.
He is an innkeeper. He is an innkeeper. It's just that he looks the other way.
He keeps the rooms for his girls.
Yes, and he actually seems to care about them.
Yes.
So good on him, right? At least if he's providing a safe working environment, I have a little bit of I'll give him a little bit of credit. And it does seem like he is. Again, like if you can't tell that Darlene and I here actually support legal prostitution because it protects the sex workers. It doesn't, if they're just out on the street when it's illegal, they are not given the proper protection of security or
And
the
there's
law.
always
They can be exploited.
There's always that middleman.
Yeah,
that's
bad. Yeah, you want legalized protections for sex workers. So
but
anyway,
not back to the Victorian.
Yeah, Victorian, you didn't have that. Like
you
sort
had,
of.
they were legalized to doing it, but they weren't protected. Because every time
it was not legal to be a prostitute. You could not be a prostitute. The difference. Remember what the laws were in London specifically at the time at the Ripper murders.
What?
That the women could sell themselves, but they could not approach a man. The rule was they could not approach a man. The man had to approach them and ask, and that they could not stand still. That they were not just lounging and doing nothing. They weren't just being
vagrants.
Yeah, that they were actually moving. So that's the point of the church that's right near Mitre Square, that's right on the edge of the old city of London, had that procession of sex workers that constantly walked around it as like, a constant stream of sex workers, because as long as they kept moving, the cops...
St. Mary's.
Is it St. Mary's?
I think it was St. Mary's. It still is St. Mary's.
That they could not... the cops basically would turn a blind eye because they're like, okay, you know what? It's not harming anybody. And if a guy starts killing prostitutes, well, that's where the problems start coming in with the Ripper, right? But anyway, back to this. Lenny basically starts choking this woman. She screams. There's a bar fight, but it turns out Lenny is Superman.
Well, he's supposed to be insane.
Well, it doesn't matter if he's insane or not. He's been stuck in a cell, but he rips apart like 8 sailors.
Yes, and breaks a lot of stuff.
He rips apart this bar. Like, he doesn't kill anybody, but the man is stupid strong. Like, everyone's terrified of him after a bit because he knocks down these hard drinking sailors like there's no tomorrow. So the next morning, what we end up having is back at the lab. It turns out that Emmanuel has tested his inoculation idea on the monkey, and the monkey went insane. Okay.
And his daughter was out
it's because he also thought, boy, he doesn't want his daughter going down the same immoral route that his wife did. So he also injected her with the inoculation, as he is a poor scientist and a poor father. So down the lab,
what made me think that it was he might think that she's not his daughter.
It shouldn't matter if she's his daughter or not. She's a human being, and he just experimented on her, and that is even brought up later. You, sir, should be brought up in front of a freaking board. Remember, his brother even says that. You experimented on your daughter. You SOB. Like, okay, anyway, the monkey went crazy. Basically, broke out of his cage and then started vomiting blood everywhere.
And you saw it in the last throes of life.
It was twitching.
It was twitching.
Basically, it turned into a rage zombie. Effectively. Yes. Okay, from 28 days later, effectively. So it goes crazy, and I don't know what happens is that his lab assistant says, "Boy, I'm glad that we didn't try this on any humans, right, doctor?" And it's not like he actually knows that he injected Penelope. The point is that it's there for Peter Cushing to look sort of at the camera with wide eyes, like, oh crap, I actually did. So it turns out that Penelope wakes up and goes crazy like her mother and dresses in the manner of a streetwalker of the time, a high-end streetwalker.
Goes to this
bar and starts getting felt up by men.
Dancing and all that.
Dancing wantonly.
And this gentleman I put
gentleman.
that in
Well,
quotes.
okay, he was being polite at first, right? And he said, "Why don't we go upstairs?" And she's like, "Okay." Goes upstairs and he gets fresh because he thinks she's a sex worker and that he has basically paid for her time. And she starts slapping his hands away as he
In
tries to
two
undoes her
drinks
brush.
of gin.
Well, I'm not saying that. Well, he might have actually thought that she was one of those girls in this bar that typically worked for a couple drinks of gin. That wouldn't be unheard of. That would not be unheard of. Again, knowing what we both know about the Rippers victims, how much they sold themselves for and how much gin was, that's not unreasonable to think that those girls would work for a couple glasses of gin. So anyway, he starts undoing her blouse, she slaps him away, and then they end up getting into a fight because he's like,
He
what the hell?
holds her down.
Yeah, he's like, okay, I guess you want it rough. Okay, like I'm not defending this guy. This guy's an asshole too. But the point is that she claws out his eyes almost. He's got claws on his, cuts on his face, and he walks down and doesn't raise a fuss. Actually, he like leaves the room, walks down, and the bartender's like, "Sir, are you okay?" And he's like, "I don't need help unless I ask for it." And then he leaves. It's not like he actually like horsewhips anybody or anything. He's just like, "Fine, I've had it. I'm done for tonight. Like this girl's crazy." So Penelope walks back down, starts dancing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And
what does she do to get?
Oh well, a sailor gets grabby and grabs her breast, and because as again, everyone thinks
she breaks a bottle and cuts him in the neck.
Yeah, and kills him. Kills the sailor who grabs her breast because again, everyone thinks that she is a prostitute. And that's why she's dancing wantonly. That's why she's in this low-cut, revealing dress in a bar along with
her hair down.
With her hair down, along with other women dressed, I won't say exactly the same, but similarly. And again, I'm not saying that one should assume that a woman is for sale. It's just that in 1894,
you're in the place.
It's 1894. It's a different world.
In that thing.
Gentlemen out there, do not assume a woman is for sale or is asking for something. That is evil and wrong. In the context of the time that this movie is supposedly set in the place with very drunk people, you can understand why a sailor might grab a woman's breasts drunkenly who is dancing in front of him along with other women that have been selling themselves. You can understand. And she
came from upstairs.
And she came from upstairs after being taken upstairs by a man. You can understand why he might think that she's for sale. So instead of saying, "Sir, I do not appreciate your advances," she breaks a bottle and cuts his throat. Okay, well,
but
that's bad.
She doesn't speak.
No, she doesn't speak.
In this.
She doesn't speak at all.
She's
completely silent. She just doesn't give a shit. She just cuts this guy's neck.
But
he drops to the floor dead.
The influence of the drugs.
So she runs and hides in a warehouse, and it's the same warehouse that Lenny is hiding in. And it turns out that Lenny isn't evil. He isn't.
No, he's sexual.
No,
predator.
Okay, you say that. He is not. He wants companionship because there are multiple times in the warehouse where he could take advantage of her and he doesn't. He holds her hand and shows her the ways. I think he wanted a companion or somebody to be with him, and he saw the sailors doing this to the women and he tried to mimic it. I think he's a very simple man. I think he is he has a developmental problem.
We're not choking them though.
No, but they were running their hands around their necks and kissing them. So again, Lenny has developmental issues. He sees other people. He has a man's urges, but doesn't have the capability of understanding them. So he's trying to figure it out. Lenny is a child.
So Lenny's on the spectrum.
Lenny has a developmental issue. That's all I'm going to say. That's because I don't want to put a label on him, but because he clearly seems to actually care. He's scared. He sees that this woman is also scared, right? Because she runs into the warehouse hiding from these people chasing her, and he tries to help her. He doesn't try to take advantage of her. He doesn't. He doesn't feel her up. He muffles her mouth because she screams when she sees him. But he's like, he motions at her to like, shh, calm down. You know, I'm gonna look. We're gonna go and hide. Come this way. Come this way.
They
Like,
get up to the top so Lenny can look to see how to leave.
How to leave, and she basically picks up a plank and beats the hell out of him until
she comes up behind him, and he ends up being hit from behind as you're looking down.
He falls out like this loading thing up like
About
4 stories up.
3 to 4 stories up.
And he's hanging on for dear life, and she just grinds his fingers underneath her shoes, so he falls to his death while smiling.
While
she
cackling
smiles. Yeah.
almost.
And he's begging for his life. You see his mouth moving, like it looks like he's pleading. You don't hear the words because she doesn't. She doesn't care. That's the point. Like, she has become evil. Right? So anyway, the cops come in and capture her. She's sent to the asylum, and we see James experimenting on rats at this point, and a nurse who took a blood sample when Penelope was brought in shows James this blood sample and goes, "Oh my God, it's
you need
filled.
To see it.
It's filled with these black cells with flagella." Now, here's where again this gets crazy. It turns out that these black cells with flagella, we learn, are in every single blood sample from other patients that are crazy. So being crazy is now caused by a specific pathogen. It doesn't matter what it is. We learn that everyone that has gone crazy or is quote unquote evil has different blood. That's very problematic. I just want to say that's very problematic.
If it was that easy, it could have been cured.
Oh God, there are so many. I have so many pages of notes for this. Okay, so let's sum it up. James finds out about the experiments. He basically breaks into Emmanuel's house to steal the skeleton because he wants to get credit for this amazing discovery.
This was the worst thief thing, too.
Yeah.
He comes with a carriage.
Yeah.
Not a cheap ass carriage.
Yeah. It's very clearly his carriage.
He is outside with the carriage, and he sends his coachman, which in the conversation with the guy in his lab was, you just get someone that
will do it. But I mean, anyway, he breaks into the lab, steals the bones. He drags like the hand through some water as he's getting out to the carriage.
The dumb criminal.
Yeah, the dumb criminal. They wrap this skeleton up in a cloak. By the way, at this time, Penelope gets out of her room and is just dancing kind of crazy outside because James at some point has brought her back to the house. So she's murdered the maid and has now escaped the house and is just dancing out in the rain. That means that, guess what? When the inevitable happens that this carriage crashes, the skeleton gets water all over it and it starts
so the hand going through the water
was pointless anyway.
Was pointless.
And we end up having Emmanuel seeing this cloaked figure in the distance, and the driver is now dead. And he finds like the finger that he cut off from the skeleton earlier, and he throws it in the fire. Okay, fair enough. So at this point, you have this cloaked evil figure come up to the house. Penelope lets him in, and it does nothing to Penelope because Penelope is evil anyway, and evil knows evil. I guess it. So he then like stalks through the house to find Emmanuel, and Emmanuel opens up the door, and I guess this creature steals his finger to replace the finger that Emmanuel
Who
destroyed.
kills his assistant, though? Somebody kills his assistant.
It was the guy that was trying. It was
The
the guy.
thief.
Yeah, it was the thief that was trying to steal the skeleton. So Emmanuel basically goes crazy in his wife's bedroom, and then we go back to the beginning of the film of him trying to describe to this doctor why he's there, what he has done, what his discovery means, and it turns out that he's inside the asylum along with his daughter, and his brother is profiting from
But his
the
brother
discovery.
goes back and gets the papers.
Yeah, because he's profiting from the discovery. The end. So obviously we have problems with this movie. We have lots of problems with this movie. There's lots of problematic things in it. There's lots of uncomfortable things in it. There's lots of really bad story or confusing story.
Not confusing, just you're like watching two movies that are kind of coinciding.
I don't see.
And they only weave in and out at some particular time, like the guy escaping and then Penelope being with him, the bar being the bar.
I don't know if I would say it's two movies. Let's start with what worked in this movie, because there are things that worked. You start, Darlene, please.
Well, the acting was not their top game. Okay?
No, not their top.
But the top, it was good acting. I wouldn't say excellent.
No, but it worked. Like Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, both very good. I think Lorna Heilbronn was good in this as well. Not excellent, but good.
They weren't at the top of their game.
No, Peter. I've seen Peter Cushing in far better. I think I even like Peter Cushing better in the Doctor Who movies, honestly. But this is he's still fine. He's still good in this. Like, I like when he is on screen, he has charisma. Christopher Lee, I think he does fine. He has charisma. I think this is, again, not at his top. You're right. So what works, what I think the thing that works for me most, though, in this is the sets. The sets are all very interesting, well-dressed, well put together. Obviously, the stupid science stuff with, colored fluids and beakers. I hate that. I hate it. Even though it sort of makes sense in the context of this movie, I just am so sick and tired of seeing it that it bothers me, even when it makes sense to be there.
Well, you have the same problem that I have with the Jacob's ladder.
Oh, well, to me, that's fun. But I mean, the colored liquid just seems, it just sits there and does nothing. If it's bubbling, okay, fine. At least that's fun. It's a little more visual. The Jacob's ladder is like that too. Why is it there? I don't know. It's a Jacob's ladder. It looks cool doing that. But like just colored liquid sitting there doing nothing.
But it's been in movies that don't have anything to do with.
Sure. It doesn't make sense in Frankenstein.
Yes.
All right.
But does it make sense in a space movie that?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But I like the sets in this. The sets are actually really well dressed. You can tell that why people get this confused with like a Hammer movie. Again, it's because of the actors and the sets look very good.
But it falls far short.
That's all I'm going to say about like what works in this, I think. The acting and the sets, because everything else is the story is poor. I can't say it's
thought.
I think it's poorly thought out. It's badly stitched together. I can't say the movie is badly paced.
No.
But the story is just like
there's too many flashbacks in it.
Again, folks, like I take notes for these.
But the question is whether you've been in the whole time in a flashback.
No,
too.
The whole time it is a flashback. That's the point. It's all unreliable narrator. So does that make sense? No, it still is a poor movie for being a poor plot, poorly told. You don't tell a badly told flashback. It's still a movie that you're trying to watch. You're trying to tell a story.
But I'm talking about the flashbacks in the flashback.
Oh,
There's-
the flashbacks in the flashback?
Yes, like when he sees his wife and blah blah blah.
See, I don't know. I do think that Emmanuel put his wife into an asylum because she was inconvenient. That she had passions that he was not willing to put up with.
Okay, but why would you marry somebody like that in the first place?
Because he had an accidental pregnancy with her. And she threatened him to come forward with it. I don't know. Like, I buy that far more than her just being like, oh, I'm going to be put into asylum because I cut a man who was trying to... She could have said this guy was trying to rape me.
How much would that fall back in that time?
As a performer, I can see that being believed. But she didn't. Like, she's just like, no, I mean, there's no reason for her to not to try to defend herself on that, right? Like,
I'm just saying I was really weirded out because I never. Yes, you're correct. We are in a flashback the whole time, but there's flashbacks inside the
flashback.
And
how reliable are those flashbacks?
And nothing of the story is reliable.
Yeah, nothing that we see is reliable at all. The only thing that we can tell for sure that is true about the story, based on the opening scene and the final scene, is that Peter Cushing's character is missing a finger. The same finger that supposedly the evil being cut off. Okay. That the skeleton is in there, right?
The skeleton is not in his room.
There's a picture. Well, there's the painting that kind of looks like what the skeleton would have been like if it had flesh on it.
Correct.
And we see the flagella cells that are the same in the flashback. Yes. That's what we see. Everything else is unreliable. Absolutely everything else is unreliable. So this entire story could have been untrue, effectively. Like, it's all effectively meaningless. And it could have been like a good tale even then, even if it was unreliable, if it was internally consistent / engaging, but it wasn't. Like, it was just sort of confusing, and I don't know, like, you like to say,
it
like,
started okay, but
yeah, it started fine, and then it just went very quickly off the rails with, like, the constant flashovers to Christopher Lee in the asylum and his crazy MK Ultra stuff. Why is he experimenting on severed arms with electrodes? Like, this is 1894. You know about nerve cells twitching with electrical impulses. Like,
because they were figuring that out.
That was bad. That's the whole point of Frankenstein.
1810.
In the 1700s, they had already been experimenting.
Yeah, they were doing it with a frog because they could really see that.
You could do it with Leyden jars. Like, yeah, with the frog, like, making him twitch, making the legs twitch. The point is that this is stuff that has been known about for over a century. Let's put it that way. Even in the 1890s, in the 1890s, it's like over a century. What are you trying to do? You're just being gruesome, experimenting on severed limbs. Like,
and you're not doing anything for the mentally ill.
No, you're not doing any. Yeah, what are you trying to do? Making an arm twitch. Are you gonna, like, bring in some psycho that is going to see a twitching arm and go, nope, I'm sane now. Sorry, thanks for your treatment, doctor.
So the doctor himself is insane.
Is crazy. Well, I don't know.
That whole family is nuts.
I hate saying this, but I'm not going to recommend it.
I'm not recommending it either.
I hate saying it because I liked Lorna Heilbronn. I liked Peter Cushing. I liked Christopher Lee. They are all good actors.
I walked out of this movie, twice?
Yeah, and I paused it, so you got to see the whole film. But, like, yeah, there were points where I was just like, man, why? What's going on? Why am I watching this? Everyone's kind of shitty.
Well, we need to wrap this up because you're just rambling.
I am rambling, but I'm so disappointed in it because a lot of these Hammer-esque films are very good, especially with these actors. It's just really disappointing. Like out of 10, what would you say?
3.
3? I think that's 3 or 3.5, I would say. And the only reason it's there is because of the actors and the scenery. Really. Like, I think there's a solid film in there. The idea is fine. It's just how they presented it. And I'm sorry if this, again, like, I always think that I'm rambling, and you even say I'm rambling at times, but I'm trying to, like, get across points of where I'm really uncomfortable watching a film or what, like, joys I feel when watching a film. And I had a lot of just uncomfortable moments watching
Uncomfortable moments of the gentleman's rape of her. The really
assault,
was
sexual assault. Yeah.
I had the problem with the father-daughter stuff of
Him being just really awful.
Yeah.
Being a really poor father. And yet seemingly coming across Emmanuel, like Peter Cushing plays it as though he's just like a truly loving father who has nothing but his daughter's best interests at heart. He really does. He's not playing it sinister at all. Like, he's not trying to, like, wink at the camera at all. He's playing it as though he is a white hat.
He thinks he is, but what he's doing is not ethical.
No, nothing about this is loving, ethical, or right. Nothing
now,
in this.
Christopher Lee's character comes off as the
Sinister evil
SOB that he pretty much
is,
unless what is said at the very end is true, which is all that stuff is a made-up tale.
Yeah, if Christopher Lee says it's all made up, it's possible that it is all made up. And that he really, that Christopher Lee's character really isn't a bad guy. And
isn't related to.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? At this point. Like, that's kind of the, I don't know. We should just leave it there. We both don't recommend it. I feel bad about saying that, but we don't.
We don't.
If you want to watch it, go ahead. It's not a complete waste of time. It isn't.
No, but I didn't care for it.
So I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.